Hey, Will Heath here, founder of Sherpa. I've got Dr. Horn here, Daryl Horn. Wanted to just do a quick video. You know, Daryl, you have gone through the process of certification. You're one of my guinea pigs, right? I'm learning how to do certifications, trying to take what I do with succession planning, put the tools in denominational leaders' hands. The reason for that, just so you know, I have a deep conviction that and I've had this for a while, that I want to I think the best people to do what I do aren't actually consultants or search firm people. I think the best people to do this are actually folks like you, association leaders, denominational leaders that are frontline walking with churches. And so you were gracious enough to go through this process with me. And just, I want to ask just a couple of questions. One, you know, you have so many different certifications and different things, right? You know what a good process is, you know what a bad one is. What was it about the certification through Sherpa with succession planning? What was it that you said, yeah, man, I really want to do this? What were some of the things?
At this point, I have been a director of missions for 17 years. And over those 17 years, I have watched churches struggle, church after church struggle, because they didn't have the proper planning or proper thought process in place to help them make decisions. One of our roles in the association is to help a church with whatever it needs. One of the needs of a church is when they experience transition in their leadership or their congregation. You know, with the pandemic, there's been a lot of shifting, a lot of adjustments.
Yeah, right. Right.
Sometimes the weaknesses of our churches has become glaring pimples on the church's face, so to speak, that you can't avoid. And one of them is just how we plan.
For succession, pastoral transition specifically.
Pastoral transition or just contingency planning. I remember you telling us during our training of a church that had the worship leader and two backups, and all three got COVID.
Oh, man.
They had a contingency plan in place.
Well, no, that church didn't. They didn't. And so COVID, right? Their worship leader, their technology people, and like they go down. They didn't have an emergency transition plan for key staff. And it's man, it really, they were scrambling trying to get all that together.
We have a lot of churches, not only in our association, but in every association, churches that if the attendance is normal and we have some money in the bank, then we're good. We don't need to think about anything else. An insurance policy is a contingency plan.
Right.
Is your insurance policy what it needs to be? Just leadership changes. Just how do we identify new leaders? How do we get them in place?
Do you for your association, or San Antonio Baptist Association, SABA? So if you hear that term, that's the shorthand for San Antonio Baptist Association. But do you have data or an idea of what the average tenure of a lead pastor is here at SABA?
That's a very good question. It really depends on the church. Okay. Sometimes a church may rotate out pastors every 5 years. Okay. They're in this psychological mindset that
it's time to get a new car. 5 years, let's do it.
Yes.
Time to get a new pastor, right?
I remember some years ago when I was talking with the pastor in his office. He said, "This is a 5-year church." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I've done the history on the church, and every 5 years they get a new pastor." One guy stayed to year 7, and the last 2 years were very troubling.
It's just baked into their DNA.
It's just part of the psychology of that particular church. We have other churches that have a completely different perspective. They expect their pastors to stay 2 and 3 decades. That's a completely different mindset.
So you've got the gambit. You've got the gambit.
Yeah.
How many churches are in SABA?
We have over 300. If you look at churches that have participated within the last 3 years, we have about somewhere in the neighborhood of 350.
Wow.
And so our association is larger than some whole state conventions.
Right.
So we deal with language issues, multiple languages.
Any pastors that cuss? You got language issues? No, I'm kidding.
I hope not.
No, I'm kidding.
I hope not. Some of them probably have wanted to during the pandemic.
Yeah, sure, right.
But rural, suburban, downtown, urban churches, we have the whole gamut. Older churches, we have a lot of churches, and a lot of associations do. We have churches that the congregation is up in age, and the community is transitioned around them, and they still have their small group. But
so that Kairos Chronos idea where the
absolutely.
culture around them is in a new season, but the church is stuck trying to steward a season of ministry that no longer exists.
And as the attendance goes down, the finances go down. Some churches are not able to provide insurance for their facilities, much less repair their facilities.
Wow.
So the planning for the future, the planning for contingency becomes very difficult because they haven't done it in a long time.
Well, so you've got broad range. I mean, you've got to be an expert
in lots of different areas.
Right. So when you look at this, like doing the certification, the training certification with Sherpas specifically, I mean, I'm drilling down to a very specific topic, right? Of how do you plan effectively around succession, a key leadership transition. What was it about this topic, even though it's so specific, you've got a lot of different issues you're dealing with, but why was it this specific topic that you chose to invest the time and the money to go through that process? Because there's no shortage of opportunities for you, things you could have done.
Part of our role as an association, as I mentioned, is to help churches in all contexts. You can't be an expert at everything. It's just impossible in today's world. But to find somebody that has a great tool that we don't have to reinvent. Why reinvent something that somebody has spent years developing and worked through? Why not take that and plug it in and plug and play, so to speak? And for example, when you came a couple of months ago and we did a workshop here.
When was that? Was that in June or was that in July? It was the end of June, wasn't it?
June.
It was a week or a week and a half after the convention. June 25th or something like that Friday. Last Friday in June is when it was.
We had a room full. We had 4, including myself, we had 4 directors of missions here. One of the ladies from one of our churches started a conversation, and we now have been able to go into that church. And just the 15-point assessment, just that one tool, you get immediate conversation. It's not like there are other processes that you can use to do long-term planning and all that. Our association, when we rewrote our mission statement and all that, we took 10 months.
Right.
Well, sometimes you don't have 10 months, and you need to go in one conversation,
really dig
create the environment to begin opening up the discussions. So that just one tool that you provide is the 15-point assessment.
A stability assessment.
We've done that in one of our churches. And it's an ongoing conversation that leads to other things. One of the points of assessment is what needs does your facility have?
Right.
That's a whole conversation by itself.
It is.
There could be a subset of items that you could put just even on that one thing. So we found that these are tools, ready-made tools that we can use that help us accomplish what we're about. And really, if a church is successful, we're successful.
And that actually helps with my vision because, I love the fact that I came here, right? We had, 30 churches? 25, 30 churches, however many it was. And there are conversations where churches are picking up the phone and they're not calling Will Heath. they're calling
Our association.
your association. So I get to put the tools in your hand, and you get to be the expert and the guide, if you will, to walk your churches through.
Another one of the tools that is part of the package. I had a pastor the other day. One of his staff members came to that training, and his staff member went back and said, "Pastor, we need to talk about this," because the pastor's within a couple of years of retirement, and now has actually extended his retirement a couple of years in order for me to come in and begin the conversation.
Wait a second. I didn't know this.
No, I hadn't had the chance to tell you.
So you have a pastor. I mean, this is a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a pastor that is saying, "Hey, I was gonna retire here, but I'm actually moving my retirement back, not because he's a control freak, but he wants to give the church time to actually adequately prepare."
He's pushing it back almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Just in order, he said, "I want you to come in, talk with our leaders, and so we can get things in place." We talked about other examples of churches that have done it well.
Yeah.
And he wants to give enough off-ramp time for him, but on-ramp time for somebody else.
I love that. There's this idea that I've heard this in so many different contexts, that anytime a pastor delays their transition, they're doing it because they want to control. And I'm like, man, like, you're putting an example into something that I've been feeling for a while. Like, most pastors, I don't feel, want to actually be control freaks, but they genuinely care for their people, and they want to shepherd their people through a season of transition. They just don't know how. They don't know how to have the conversation.
One of the things you bring up in the training is everything is contingent upon the pastor that's leaving. And the first component is it's emotional first.
Yeah, Pishka, yeah.
There's a lot of emotion. If a church has had a pastor for 20 some years, the church goes through transition emotionally because this guy's not going to no longer be our pastor, and the pastor himself has to transition emotionally, plus his family.
Right.
Plus the pastor's wife. I mean, there's a whole lot of unseen stuff. You could have a really good plan in place, but the whole emotional part may not help you.
Train wreck.
Yeah,
It's train wreck.
it could be.
So just to, for you, as you've looked at, and you've been certified in various tools. I mean, your tool chest, you've built a really healthy tool chest, plus just the things that you personally have developed over time. What is something that you would say is made the Sherpa training distinct? Obviously, I'm focusing on succession planning. Like, that's a very specific. Other than the topic itself, like, what are you saying that is distinct with the tools of Sherpa versus maybe some of the other certifications? It's not good, better than, or whatever. It's just how are some of the tools different?
A couple of things I would say is it has some components that you can take in and get a quick win. Like in one meeting, you can get a whole lot of conversation, good and bad. Good meaning we need to talk about this. Bad, we don't want to talk about this.
Right.
But you've just put your finger on a nerve that needs to be touched.
You elevate the tools, elevate conversations that need to be had that otherwise wouldn't.
Other tools do that, but I think these are geared specifically as a package to be able to address a variety of needs.
Yeah.
Plus, you train us to go in. And as you know, associations are the closest entity to a church.
Right.
A church might have a relationship with another organization, but we're the ones that deal with almost all churches, different backgrounds, different contexts, different cultures. And we try to have enough tools to be able to shape those and craft it to meet the needs of the church.
Yeah. One of the things, part of the training, obviously, we went through, you got the videos and then the calls, but then the ongoing coaching that I give you guys. I remember what it was like going through a certification process. I won't say which one because it's not a negative comment about it, so I don't want to be perceived that way. But you go into you spend 4 days like in a classroom environment, right? You learn the principles. I distinctly remember walking out of that environment, scratching my head, wondering, how in the world am I going to do this with someone? Like I had no way of understanding that.
Yeah.
And so creating this process, I was like, okay, there has to be a knowledge transfer component, but it's like, I really wanted the certification process to feel like I'm coming alongside as well, not just, hey, come to the class, we're done.
Yeah.
But hey, how can we keep having conversations? How can I even be a part of, even like coming down and being a part of a conference and using my platform to validate you guys? Don't call me, call the associations and stuff. Yeah.
Everybody that attended that workshop walked away saying these were very good conversations.
Yeah.
The Kairos Chronos conversation,
Massive.
I think, was a great place to start. And the little image you drew up explained it. Just the image itself, you could get the basis of the concept. For me, I realized a long time ago that if I personally don't continue to develop as a leader, then I hinder the growth of my organization. Because as leader, I need to grow so my organization grows. And if I can grow in my thinking and my development as a person, so does my association.
Yeah.
Because I can't take somebody where I'm not.
Yeah.
Or where I haven't been.
I remember when we were talking, you had said there was a season in the church and in the association here where you noticed that the deacons, like deacon bodies, were undertrained, underdeveloped. So that was like a multi-year kind of emphasis for you. I think maybe 8 years or 7 years.
That was prior to my arrival. A previous staff member started doing deacon training. And so about the time I got here, I was at the end of a 10-year process.
Okay.
And so what happened, according to that previous staff member, is there were a lot of fights in churches, and when they began to train deacons, they got less and less calls over time.
Gotcha.
And so it became embedded within, in a good way, it became embedded into...
Embedded, not inbred.
Embedded, yeah. became embedded into the DNA of the association that we do this type of training, and here's the role of a deacon. And one of the conversations I had with you is too much of the time in our denomination, it's been a stop and go process.
In our denomination, we're Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist, yes. Yeah. I can't speak for anybody else, how they do planning, but I just know when I was a kid, it was the same paradigm that sometimes we live in here. A church calls a pastor and he stands up on one Sunday and says, today's my last day, or next Sunday's my last day. Right. And then the church doesn't know anything about it, and we have to pick up the pieces and try to struggle to put things in place. And there's a lot that needs to be changed about the process. So just like the deacon training helped create healthier situations in our context, I'm hoping that what we're doing with contingency planning, transition of leadership, 15-point assessments, all the tools that Sherpa provides, I see the need to make that part of our DNA.
Yeah. The thing that I so appreciate about that is, one, you selected. There's a lot of research. Thank you for choosing us, but the discipline. So the staff member prior to you, or you got the tail end of a 10-year project, right? I remember you telling me, like, "Hey, Will, this is the kind of thing that we're going to be focused on for a while. It's not the only thing you're going to do, but you're going to bring focus in it." And just like the association saw the benefit of a consistent focus on deacon training, what are you hoping will become true about the association when you have 5, 7, 8, 10-year focus on succession and healthy, proactive leadership transitions? fast forward 10 years, like the arguments went
Yeah.
down at the end of the
Yeah.
deacon that decade. What's the dream for you and your association at the end of this run that you're embarking on with
I think
succession?
one of the goals would just be healthier churches overall,
Hmm.
churches that plan ahead, think ahead. When a pastor leaves and they get a new pastor, typically there's no plan in place
Yeah.
to how are we going to help the pastor get up and running in our context.
And onboarding. The
Onboarding.
onboarding conversation is
That's
so,
a whole different,
it's
a whole
critical.
nother piece.
Yeah, it's critical.
A lot of guys kind of try to piecemeal their thing together when they make the changes. But that whole presentation that you gave us during our training kind of elevated everything. Here's a form to fill out. It puts some structure to the thought.
Yeah.
And that's what I appreciated about what you provided, is it put more structure to it.
Yeah.
And it is a piece that we now can take to a church.
Yeah.
And we have several churches looking for pastors, and some of the questions we've asked is, what's your onboarding process?
Paradigm shifting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
If
Paradigm shifting.
we start putting that into search committees, not only do you need a plan to find a resume and a candidate and then figure out which candidate you want, what's your plan to follow up with that?
Yeah.
A lot of our churches don't think about that component.
And you're in
So-
the perfect place to guide them,
Yeah.
right? They're not going to call a guy like me, right? They're going to call you.
And sometimes they don't call us.
Sometimes they don't call you, right? Right. So, I wanted to do this video with you just to speak into denomination, associational leaders. It's, I genuinely, I really mean this. I want to get to the point where churches don't need to call me, like where they're calling you directly, and you and your staff are the front line. What would you say to? So there's my sales pitch. Call me. I'd love to certify you. Right. What would you say? What would be your encouragement to just other association denominational leaders, Baptist or not? The Lutherans or the Methodists listening in. What would you tell them?
I would say that I think you need to consider your own personal development as a leader. And sometimes our organizations, our structures suffer because we as leaders quit learning. We need to continue to grow as a person, as a follower of Christ, and be all that God wants us to be. I know that sounds like the Army. This isn't the Army, but I do think God wants us to be all
Spiritual army, right?
Yeah, all that God has designed us to be. And if my association quits growing because my lack of leadership, then I believe God holds me responsible for what happens in our association. So I would simply encourage you to consider your own personal growth, but also consider adding more effective tools that you can offer churches to help them fulfill the mission or the design that God has given them. And really, we're here to serve churches. Our mission statement is to connect, encourage, and support churches for kingdom impact. And if a tool helps, we want to add it to our toolbox.
Yeah.
And
there's lots of tools.
Yeah.
What I do is one of those tools, right? But there's a lot of tools out there, man, that are fantastic.
From my perspective, this tool hits a definite need in our churches. It's a vacuum. Yeah. And most of the time when there's a vacuum of leadership, typically the wrong person steps in that vacuum.
Yeah.
And we want to have healthy processes. One of the pieces of paperwork that we're provided is an emergency plan. What do we do in the case of an emergency? We take care of our families, or we should take care of our families. We should have a will. We should have life insurance, other things that are going to provide for our families.
A place where the documents actually are and safe,
Yeah.
and people know where it is.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, it's
so
much, yeah.
our kids don't have to go search through everything to figure it all out.
Yeah, yeah.
Why shouldn't we do that? If we do that for our bride and our family, why shouldn't we do that for the bride of Christ and our spiritual family?
Yeah.
I think we as leaders ought to hold ourselves to a higher standard. It's not easy. There's a lot to learn, but making the commitment to do it, I think, is vitally important.
The thing that in 2010, I commissioned the Barna Group to do a national survey on the topic of succession. At that time, they interviewed 600 pastors for me. I recreated that and I expanded that survey in 2019. And what was fascinating to me is the number of churches, that number of pastors that we surveyed in 2019 that said that they were interested in succession planning, transition resources. 6 in 10 pastors said that they were definitely or they were definitely interested or just interested. 6 in 10. I'm scratching my head. I'm like, man, is there another topic outside of like funding ministry or the topic of disciple making? Like 6 in 10 pastors are saying they want resources in this. I'm like, man, is there another topic that is that front of mind in this? And I just asked the question, if our pastors are telling, I didn't make that up. I hired the Barna Group to do the research for a reason. They're very credible. And it's like, if we have that many pastors asking for help or wanting resources, why would we not? Why would associations and denominations not want to be the experts or be the go-to resource provider? And I can have the opportunity to equip you to do that.
Yeah.
So you guys can be the front line to a massive conversation. So, Daryl, thank you, man, for your friendship, for your just the relationship we've developed. We're still figuring this whole thing out, right? But I would love to have a conversation with you. But if you don't want to call me first, call Daryl first. Reach out to SABA and just say, hey, Daryl, he'll give you the honest opinion on me and the tools and stuff. And I'm learning. He's been helping me grow what I do. But we'd love to connect with you. I'd love to talk to you about how we could embed these tools into your resources that you offer your local churches.
One last thought.
Yeah.
Just a final parting thought. You and I as ministers are not guaranteed tomorrow. And there's no guarantee that we're going to live into tomorrow. So we better make plans today for those around us, and to leave things in good shape, and to do the best we can while we have the moments that we have. But we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So God bless you in your planning. God bless you in your thought process. If we can help you, we'd be glad to.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate it. Thank y'all.